Well, hello there. We're back, and so are you. And we are here today. That is we, meaning me, Charlie, and this
Linda Bloom here with you.
For those of you who haven't tuned in before, welcome to you, and welcome to everyone, whether you've seen us before or not. But you probably, definitely, in fact, have not heard us talk about what we're going to be talking about today. You may have heard about something that is very much directly related to what we're talking about, and that is something referred to as mindfulness. So if you haven't been living in a cave for the last couple of years, you've probably heard that word quite a bit because it's out in the culture, on the cover of magazines, on TV shows and blogs. And what we're going to be talking about today is an aspect of mindfulness in which it's possible to create a sustained experience of profoundly intense awareness and concentration over a sustained period of time. And what it is that can bring to your experience, to your relationships, and to the quality of your life. The basis for what we're going to be talking about today comes from a book that was written 20 years ago by a man, I always have
long name,
trouble.
Many syllables.
I can't spell his name, but on a good day I can speak it. It's Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Csikszentmihalyi. And he wrote a book called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how to create that experience and what the benefits are from it, aside from the pleasure of being in that state. Athletes call it the zone. You know, when you get into that space where you're just in the flow of things, you're completely immersed in the experience. And it's like you can't do anything wrong. Everything is perfectly natural. There's no self-consciousness. There's no inner chatter going on. You're just completely focused, present, and immersed totally in the experience. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that in terms of how that can relate to and be produced in the context of relationships, right?
Yes. So those of you who are not familiar with the term flow, you've had an experience of flow sometime in your life, hopefully often in your life, when you were so immersed in some challenge, in some activity, that you were really lost in the experience. You were so completely absorbed. And Csikszentmihalyi speaks about how important it is to find the sweet spot. And that sweet spot is you can't be too anxious because the challenge is too far beyond your skill set. Your anxiety is going to keep you from flow. But if you're not challenged enough, you're going to be bored. And the boredom is going to keep you from getting into flow state, which he defines as joy-filled engagement. So it's this effortless, drawn into, focused attention where you have a sense of passion, of meaning, of purpose, because all that has gone before to bring you to this moment has prepared you to meet this challenge. And people lose track of time. They forget to eat. They can go on for hours. They forget they're tired. They forget to go to sleep. They're so engaged in the process. Now, Csikszentmihalyi usually uses illustrations of people who are athletes, in the arts, business people, and in government, because he studied them the most. In fact, in 90s, he spent 5 years finding the people who were at the top of their fields in those fields and studied 91 of them very intensely. And he discovered, no surprise, that the people have reached the top of their fields because they're in flow so much of the time. They're so passionately engaged in what they're doing that they become so accomplished. But he also studied people who weren't the cream of the cream, who weren't at the top of their fields, more ordinary people like us, and they get into flow quite often too, as long as they are intentional about bringing their skill set to a challenge that's just a little bit beyond the regular challenge that they meet. And that brings out the best in them.
So these two factors are really critical, what Linda was just referring to. Being able to find that sweet spot that's in between too much and not enough, and then too much stress or challenge. To find that place where we're pressed into our edge and having to confront some of our perceived limitations experientially. And when we're in that place, it can be incredibly compelling because there's something that's really exciting about meeting that edge and perhaps possibly going beyond it. And there's also going to be some fear, and fear often can be stressful depending upon how much of it is there. So we want to have some stress. And it's okay if there's some fear there, but to have it be to use Haley's, that's easier to say than the other last name, his definition, we want to be able to find that area where there's just enough of that to press us towards that experience of immersion, just to feel compelled to put ourselves totally into it. And one of the ways that we can do that is through play. Not just athletic play, but any form of play, usually mostly in the context of relationships with other people. Maybe we're on the same team. Maybe we're competing against each other. But play is different from competition because athletes can be playing the game and they can be competing, and sometimes they're doing them both together, but sometimes they're doing one or the other. And when we talk about play, what we're referring to is the experience of being involved in an activity for no other purpose beyond the sheer joy and pleasure of experiencing it. Mm-hmm. And it's not that we don't care whether or not we win or lose, but it's not about winning or losing. It's about really being into it. Winning and losing can really help you to concentrate your attention more. If you feel like there's something in it for you, if you do win, then you're going to probably put more into the experience than you would if you don't have any other outcome or goal that's available to you. But when the goal is the same thing as the means to the goal, that is, when the goal is just to experience the pleasure of the engagement, of the intensity, of the connection, of the concentration, the pleasure of that immersion in the experience, that's what brings about the state of flow.
Mm-hmm. So this is the highest state that happiness can go to. When you go to flow, that's when you're hitting the high ranges. So when he did the research on these thousands of people, he had them agree that they would keep a beeper on them round the clock, 24 hours a day. And at intermittent times during the day and the night, he would beep them. And they pledged that they would write in a notebook what they were doing and assess their level of happiness. it probably wouldn't be any surprise to you that when they were eating, they would get high scores in their happiness and well-being. When they were having sex, they would report high scores in their happiness and well-being. But sometimes when they were playing games, like when they were playing chess, or maybe they were out hiking or mountain climbing or riding bikes or skiing or snowboarding, doing some kind of athletic activities. But one of the things that the researchers find is having animated conversations, that this was a signature strength of the very happiest couples is they were engaged in conversations about areas of interest and discovery and learning that really lit them up. And those people get very high scores. This is one of the indicators of the happiest couples, that they're in flow state together with games that they play and activities that they participate in a large portion of the time. It strengthens their bond with each other. There's a researcher named Brenda McDaniel, and she's at Kansas State University, and she did the state-of-the-art research on the happy couples having animated, passionate conversations with each other that go on and on because they're so involved. They get in flow state and they just keep building on each other's ideas, and they're in discovery, and that really lifts them up. So when you think of the activities that you have participated in that have brought you to the highest levels of well-being, some of them may be individual. Maybe it's when you're in your garden and you're pruning your roses that you have that sublime ecstasy. But there may be other times that when you're in relationship with your lover, with your partner, with your spouse, or with a dear friend, or maybe it's with one of your kids or a sibling, that there's something about the shared experience that really lifts you up into the higher zones. Because we're presenting this idea to you to discover when you've gotten in flow state before, whether it's been individual or whether it's been partnering with somebody else, and how you might have more moments, expanded time spans of flow by yourself and also in relationship with another person, because this will clearly lift you into the higher category of well-being and happiness when you have those joyful moments.
So this sounds pretty good to me, and I'm assuming that it probably sounds pretty good to a lot of you out there. And what I'm also assuming is that as good as this might sound, you may be among the people, and it's probably the majority, who are not going to take what we're saying and integrate it into your life and make some of the changes and involve yourself in the way that we're talking about in your relationships and in other activities, even though this is something that sounds pretty good to you. And there will be people who do take us up on this and apply some of the things that we're talking about. So it doesn't mean that you don't want to have this experience if you find that you're not really putting as much into your activities and into your relationship as you probably would need to in order to experience this. But what it does probably mean is that in addition to this desire, you also have what we refer to and have in these talks previously as competing commitments. That is, that there are other desires that you have that run counter to what it will require of you to really take this on with, as Linda said earlier, an intention to have this experience. Because that will require more of you than the ordinary consciousness that most of us operate from in our lives when we're kind of on cruise control. You know what that is. That in that experience, there's this feeling that we don't really need to listen too carefully. We don't need to pay attention because there's nothing there that requires me to make the effort to put my awareness and my focus and my concentration on something. Either I don't think it's going to pay off very much, or I already know that, or I just don't feel like it. You know, it's easier just to sort of stay on cruise control. Mm-hmm. So, you know, like anything else that's worth something, it's going to require us to be willing to challenge some of those internalized limits that prevent us from going into and through our perceived beliefs about what it is that we're comfortable with, that our comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that many couples, I go so far as to say most couples, don't hit the high ranges of joy and fulfillment in their partnerships is because they opt for the comfort and security. So they settle for the boredom rather than going for the growth model and pitting themselves against challenges. So some of you know that we interviewed the happiest couples we could find and let them tell us their secrets of success in their own words. And there was a couple that we interviewed named Antra and Rich Borofsky. And as a younger man, Rich was a hockey player. So he was a hell of a good ice skater. To be able to be accomplished at hockey, you have to be fast on your skates and, you know, be able to move gracefully and with power. And Antra saw right away how much he enjoyed, how blissed out he got when he was on the ice. So she made up her mind that she was going to learn how to ice skate. And she took a lot of lessons and she got good at it. And they started to ice dance together. And so they were in sync with each other. They learned how to do graceful movements dancing on the ice. And I'll never forget when we interviewed her, she talked about this with, you know, like glowing terms. And she ended with, it was heaven on ice. Because they got into that flow state together. Now, of course, they didn't have the perfect relationship. No couple has the perfect relationship. But when you have more moments when you're synced up, do you know, when you're dancing together or you're singing together, or you're mountain climbing together, or you're skiing together, or you're writing poetry together, or blog together, or writing books together, or whatever it is that you're doing that lifts you into those states, do you know there's more bandwidth to be able to gracefully handle the aggravation and the differences, the things that annoy us about our partner, the disappointments. That's inevitable in every partnership. But if you can put the emphasis on the things that you do together, where you are in this kind of ecstatic state, this blissed out state, this state where you're so happy to be alive and that you're so happy to have a partner to share this aliveness with, it makes the other part so much more doable.
Yeah, there's another characteristic to being in the flow state, and that is there's heightened and enhanced creativity, so that you not only have more bandwidth to deal with the challenges and the difficulties of the situation or the relationship, but you have a broader and a deeper sense of possibilities that you can't otherwise recognize when you're in a more ordinary state of consciousness. And so what happens is that you can co-create together. You can see possibilities that you literally cannot recognize when you're not in that state. And one of the other conditions that Linda mentioned was intentionality,
Mm-hmm.
which is to have the conscious intent when you are involved in something, to choose to really take this on fully, to really give it your fullest attention. One of the things that the Buddhists say is that boredom is a function of a failure to provide adequate attention. So when you're not paying attention, when you're not giving your focused awareness to anything that you're involved with at the time, then you're more likely to experience boredom. It's a more superficial reflection of what it is that you're being aware of. And so to go into an experience with that intent is going to be more likely to predispose you to have an experience of flow. And if you notice that you're with somebody or you're doing something and you don't feel particularly engaged with it, well, there's a couple of different things you can do. I mean, if you genuinely don't have any interest in
Mm-hmm.
what's going on here, you can respectfully remove yourself from that situation. But in most cases, it is possible through your intention to find a way to involve yourself with it, to maybe be proactive in a way that you're feeling more engaged, that you're taking more responsibility for what's happening here. If the conversation is kind of lightweight, or it's superficial, or it's just kind of chit chat, and you're not interested in that, which is something that I don't have a lot of interest in, rather than just kind of zoning out or excusing yourself, both of which are possible, to keep in mind that there's another possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And that is to take responsibility for making an effort to make this situation more interesting,
Mm-hmm.
to take it to another level, to be the one who makes it more meaningful because of what you are contributing to it, and to see how people respond. Now that's going to take a risk,
Mm-hmm.
because some people might like it and some people might think you're weird or worse.
Oh, well. So
But it
little
won't be
edgy.
boring though.
It's a little edgy. And
But
that's
flow
what
requires you to be.
Cheeks sent me
We'll
highly.
just call him Cheeks for short.
He says you got to get out there on that edge.
Skinny branches.
Yeah. And that's where the juice is. So the research is really very definitive about the long-term happy couples. They haven't gone the comfort and security model. They've gone the adventure and novelty model. And 50 years plus, they're still out there on that edge. It never stops. And so we invite you to look. And if there's some inclination that I'd like to try this, that, or other thing, what might bring you into flow? What is your area of passion? What challenge might you want to pit yourself again? And particularly if you have somebody that you are close to, that you might invite into doing some kind of little edgy, little risky, maybe going to an exotic culture, maybe doing a creative project, maybe it's athletic, maybe it could be anything that you both agree to, that you want to be in league with each other. And so, do you want to take on this challenge? Do you want to press that edge? Do you want to see if you can be in flow state more of the time? And if you have a companion who wants to be in flow state more of the time, man, I think that's success in the highest form. That's happiness in its richest, deepest form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So see what shows up when you give some thought and maybe have a conversation with a friend or with a partner about whether or not you each would like to bring more of this aliveness and passion and purpose into your life. and what you might want to experiment with. It's the path of lifelong learning, and that's one of the things that flow continually generates, is more awareness of the lessons and the teachings and the possibilities that are there that we can learn about, that are beyond our ordinary consciousness, which is filtering things in a way that prevents us from seeing beyond that.
How about if we, in the last couple minutes, we just give them a few ideas of some of the things that we do that take us into flow? Because I'm happy to do that. I love to team cook. And if Charlie and I create something together in the kitchen, that really lights me up. I find cooking to be a really creative process. And if we collaborate and do something together, that's so fun for me. Of course, our sexual expression is very creative and always lifts me up into the higher zones of well-being. But just simply taking a walk and doing walks and talks, I feel like we have some invigorating conversations just when we're walking the beach for an hour. And both of us read a lot. We're hungry learners. It's signature strengths for both of us. So we have these amazing conversations all the time. I don't have to read a lot of the books that he reads because he distills the essence of the book down for me. And I do the same for him. And we have some amazing conversations. And we've been doing that since the first week that we met, that we always have so much to say to each other. These exotic trips that we go on to foreign cultures, the more exotic the culture is, the more exciting it is. And we share that together. And we always mention to each other what we have to learn from that particular culture. So these are a few examples that come to mind because I feel like we live in flow state a lot. I must say that when we're collaborating on blogs and books, that's a checkered, sometimes it really works and sometimes it doesn't. But when we get into that zone and we're really humming and we're really working together, it doesn't get too much better than that. Mm-hmm. Do you have some examples in addition to the ones I offered?
Well, our personalities are so different that we're constantly challenged to
built in.
Come into each other's worlds.
Yeah.
And after all these years together, those differences haven't disappeared.
No, they're not going to.
They're getting easier to deal with, but we're constantly, I feel like I'm constantly challenged to press into your reality. So that
me too.
Yeah, I know. It's so that I have found that enormously beneficial and incredibly frustrating. But it's
been
really worth it.
Flexible
It's been
out
worth
of all of this practice.
Yeah.
It's helped us be creative, and at least I've really loosened up so many of my attachments to how I want things to be. I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. And I know that we've both learned a lot from entering into each other's reality and developing aspects of ourselves that we have had to in order to remain sane and together.
Thank you, and you're welcome.
Yeah. So there's plenty of things, and there's plenty of opportunities here and in life for everybody if we're willing to just loosen our grip on the way we think things are supposed to be or have to be, and be willing to see what happens when we can let go of some of our preconceived attachments and see what happens. Okay,
so I'm going to tell them what I'm going to talk about next week.
Well, let me show them a picture of the book.
Oh, show them a picture of the book.
This is the book that we were talking about.
I've read it multiple times.
Okay.
Really worth reading.
There we go.
Worth studying.
And
it's full of underlines.
Yeah. So anyway, check it out. It's really a great book.
Yeah, and I want to announce the topic for next week's Facebook Live is how do you define success? Don't take the off the rack definition of success. Everybody's got a personal definition of success. And my definition is related to this flow state stuff. More flows, more success. And you wanted to tell them about the ebooks.
I did, yeah, and I still do.
Okay.
So I am going to tell them that we have 3 free ebooks. I know a lot of you have already gotten them. And if you haven't and you're interested, we're happy to give you a link to receive them. And all you need to do is go to our website, which is Bloomwork, BLOOMWORK.com. And on the homepage, there will be a link, can't miss it, to our 3 free ebooks. And you just click that and you'll be able to pick them up.
Okay, and last but not least, before we tell you goodbye, I am going to be offering an afternoon women's course on May the 19th about archetypal psychology and the goddesses in every woman. So if you're interested, don't hesitate to call me and I'll tell you all about the class because it's gorgeous. See you next week.